For coming to today's symposium. It's Saturday, so thanks very much. Today I'm going to present a work with Professor Hui Zheng from UCLA. In this study, we're trying to kind of identify where there's a paradox between immigrants' advancing morbidity and mortality and the context is in the US. We especially want to figure out where this paradox exists over time with age, and if that is, then what's the kind of explanation for this paradox. Much research have found that immigrants on the whole have better health conditions and lower mortality rate than native-born population in the US and also in other European countries. So this kind of advantage has been attributed to healthy individuals' greater tendency to migrate and immigrants' community that promote social, a better health behavior and social support, and the segment bias, right? That is unhealthy immigrants' greater tendency to return to their home country. But on the other hand, research has found that immigrants' advantage in health tend to diminish with age. That is, they found older immigrants, and especially Hispanic immigrants, tend to have a greater tendency to have disabilities and other health problems than the native-born population, including some work studied by Bob Palmer here. But the line in the research in mortality, however, kind of display a very different picture. So some research has found immigrants actually generally have lower mortality rate, and this advantage actually extend to older age. So if we kind of take together these two lines of literature, we actually can wonder there's a so-called immigrant morbidity mortality paradox. That is, even though older immigrants may potentially have more health and disease in older ages compared to the same age natives, they may continue to have this lower mortality rate. Right? So we're trying to, in our study, we're trying to figure out where there is a paradox or not, and if there is, then what's the kind of possible explanation here. So the conceptual framework we follow in this study is so-called progression of a morbidity framework, which posits that the progression of morbidity starts with the physiological dysregulation, followed by diagnosis of disease, functional loss, disability, and eventually death. So for this framework, then chronic conditions are the major cause of disability, and chronic conditions and disability are major cause of mortality. So then in order to understand this paradox, we need to figure out what's the contribution of both the preference and also the disabling effect of various chronic conditions to the nativity gap in disability, and we also need to figure out what's the contribution of the preference and also mortality impact of the various chronic conditions and the disability to the nativity gap in mortality. Right? So by doing so, we can unpack what, if there's a paradox, then what's the main contribution there to this paradox. And we further want to kind of understand how this paradox may evolve with age. Right? So does it kind of become, does it change with age or not? So data we use for this study is from National Health Interview Survey data from 2002 to 2018, with linked mortality data to 2019. And the main method we use is a binder Harker regression decomposition method. So we look at 8 major causes of chronic disease, including cancer, cardiovascular disease, lung disease, mental illness, diabetes, liver disease, kidney disease, and musculoskeletal conditions. And we look at two measures of disability. One is a functional limitation, which measures the intrinsic limitation in body function. For example, respondents will ask if they can walk for a quarter mile, if they can stand or sit for 2 hours, and so on. So this kind of measure is irrespective of the environment. Another measure is activity limitation, which asks respondents if they need any assistance in performing the activities of daily living and instrumental activities of daily livings. So this kind of measurement is more influenced by the social context and the living environment of the respondents. So we look at two measure limitations, trying to figure out whether finding may be dependent on different kinds of measure or not. In terms of mortality status, we restrict data to the person-year format because mortality status is time-varying. In terms of native status, consists of native-born, foreign-born. We further differentiate this status by race, ethnicity, gender, education, and years since immigration, to figure out what's to do a more comprehensive analysis of this paradox. In all analysis, we control for age as survey, birth cohort, mental status, smoking status, BMI, and health insurance coverage to get the net contribution of the disease and the disability to the native gap in mortality. So I'm going to first present some kind of descriptive findings, and then present this decomposition analysis from OHACA and the blind decomposition method. So this figure shows the age pattern of a preference of chronic disease by race, ethnicity, and nativity. So each panel is one race group, which consists of white, blacks, Asian, and Hispanics of Mexican origin and non-Mexican Hispanics. Within each panel, there are 4 lines. The navy line or blue line is US-born population, and the green line is always the foreign-born population. We further differentiate foreign-born by years since immigration, that is YSI since more or less than 10 years old. So, on average, right, you will find the green line is lower than blue lines. In other words, means that foreign-born population have lower preference of chronic disease compared to native-born population in young age. Young adulthood, but this advantage kind of diminish or shrink with age. Right? So in some cases, for example, for non-Hispanic blacks and also Hispanics of Mexican origin, you'll find the blue line or green line actually surpass or cross over the blue line. In other words, it means that for some group, the advantage actually kind of diminish or even reverse in old age. But no matter what, throughout most age group, we find immigrants still have this advantage in chronic disease. And when this crossover happen, it tends to happen in quite old age. By further differentiating the immigrant group by years since immigration, by more than 10 years old, we find all the patterns similar for different immigrant group, even on the line for YSI less than 10 years, which is a dotted line here, is much more unstable, which is mainly due to the smaller sample size for this YSI group within 10 years. And we further differentiate by gender, and the man here is a blue line, and woman, man here is a solid line, right, and the woman is a dotted line. And but no matter for which gender, we find the convergence or crossover happen for all the group. We further differentiate by education group, that is where immigrants or native-born have more a bachelor degree or no bachelor degree. Overall finding is also kind of similar, that is we find this convergence in chronic disease happen for both education group. In terms of second measure, that is a functional limitation, or one measure of disability, we find that this native gap actually widened from young old, 20 years old, to around mid-age, that is around like 50 to 60 years old, and then kind of narrows in older age. And in some cases, for example, for the non-Hispanic Asians and the Hispanics of Mexican origin, and also non-Mexican Hispanics, we find a kind of crossover. But even when crossover happen, it tends to happen in quite old age. In other words, again, on average, like immigrants, most time throughout their life course, they still have a low level of functional limitation compared to the native-born population. Differentiating by YSI more or less than 10 years produce similar findings. Again, even though, but the pattern for YSI less than 10 years is more unstable due to the smaller sample size. We further differentiate by gender and also by education group. Overall pattern is similar, that is the convergence of crossover happen for both genders and both education group. And due to time constraint, I'm not going to present finding on activity limitation, but finding for active limitation is actually kind of similar for functional limitation. So the last one is a mortality risk. So in contrary to the pattern based on disease and disability, we find that immigrants' advantage in mortality risk actually kind of widens with age, right? So the native gap in the mortality risk actually kind of increased from young adulthood to the late adulthood. And this also happened for immigrants with different YSI, years since immigration, different genders, and also different education group. So in other words, we find that a very general pattern in that is this nativity gap in disability and the disease kind of narrows with age, but nativity gap in mortality kind of widens with age. In other words, we do find this kind of paradox, right? So even though immigrants' advantage in disease or disability kind of shrink or diminish with age, but on the other hand, their advantage in mortality actually kind of increase with age. So then the question is why that is such a paradox, right? So since all this overall pattern apply to all this social demographic group, that's why in the decomposition analysis, I'm not going to further differentiate gender and race ethnicity. Instead, we are just going to compare native-born population to the foreign-born population. So this is the main finding for decomposition for the contribution of the preference and the disabling effect of chronic disease and to the native gap in functional mutation. So there's a lot of data here, and I don't expect you to read through them, but I'm going to kind of emphasize several kind of main findings, and in the end, I'm going to also have a figure to summarize the main information from this table. So the upper panel of this table shows the nativity-specific preference of functional mutation and also native gap in functional mutation within each age group, and also the changes from age 25 to 84. Then the lower panel shows decomposition results can differentiate the contribution for the preference or composition of this disease, and also disabling effect of this disease to the native gap in functional mutation within each age and also across age. So for example, like in age 25 to 34, the preference of functional mutation is about 10% among foreign-born population, which is about 8 percentage point lower compared to the native-born population. And then with age, we find this immigrant advantage in functional mutation or low preference of functional mutation kind of increase to around until around age 65, and then decrease afterwards. But even in the oldest age, 75 to 84, we still find that immigrant advantage immigrants still have 3.9 percentage point lower in functional mutation compared to the native-born population. And then from age 25 to 84, the advantage in low preference function limitation diminished by about 4.2 percentage point. Then the question is why first immigrants have this kind of advantage in functional mutation, and then also the second is why this advantage can diminish with age. So in the lower panel again, we decompose the contribution of the preference and also disabling effect of this chronic disease to this native gap in functional mutation. So in age 25 to 34, right, so each column, right, you'll find there are two kind of columns. One is absolute contribution, which shows the absolute contribution of either preference and also disabling effect of this disease to the total difference in this functional mutation within each age group. And the relative contribution basically is the ratio of this absolute contribution and the total difference. So the reason why immigrants have overall lower preference of functional mutation in age 25 to 34 is because they have low preference of cardiovascular disease, lung disease, mental illness, and musculoskeletal conditions, in addition to the lowest disabling effect of the mental illness and musculoskeletal conditions. But with age, then we find this advantage kind of diminish, and which is due to several reasons. The first is that even though immigrants have low preference of mental illness, diabetes, but after age 65, right, we actually find this coefficient turn to net positive. In other words, means that after age 65, the immigrants actually start having more mental illness and diabetes. And they contribute to about like 8% or 39% to 7% of this diminishing advantage in functional mutation among immigrants compared to the native-born population. And they not only are more likely to have mental illness, diabetes, but they also more likely to be disabled from mental illness, diabetes, showing the lower column, lower row here. The second is that even though immigrants in general, they have lower preference of cancer, cardiovascular disease, lung disease, and musculoskeletal conditions, but they increasingly become more likely to be disabled from these chronic conditions. And the third contribution is that even though immigrants have low preference of lung disease and musculoskeletal conditions throughout all the age group, but this advantage actually kind of decrease. Then the shrinking advantage in this preference of lung disease and musculoskeletal conditions also contribute to now about 8% and 20% of this diminished advantage. So then this figure we're trying to summarize the contribution of the preference and disabling effect of chronic disease to the changes in the native gap in functional mutation from age 25 to 84. Right, so again, the main contribution here, the first is the increasing preference. So in this figure, the blue bars here indicates the contribution of the preference of this disease, and the orange bar indicates the contribution of the disabling effect of this disease to the changes in functional mutation from age 25 to 84. So the first main contribution is this increasing preference of mental illness and diabetes among immigrants. That contribute to about 40 to 7% of this diminished advantage function limitation. And the second is that even though immigrants have low preference of lung disease and musculoskeletal conditions throughout all age group, but their advantage actually shrink. Right, and this shrinking advantage in preference of lung disease function limitation and muscular conditions still contribute to this diminished advantage function limitation. And the third is that they become more likely to be disabled from this major disease and major chronic disease. Then the next one is we try to unpack what's the reason for these immigrants kind of increasing advantage in mortality. Right? Why they become less likely to die compared to foreign native-born population, even though they become more likely to have disability and also more likely to have disease. Right? So this table also shows that immigrants have about 0.05 percentage point lower in mortality risk in age 25 to 34, but this advantage increased by about 1.99 percentage point throughout these 60 years. And then we further decompose the contribution of this disease and disabilities to this kind of strengthening immigrants' advantage in mortality. And I'm going to focus on the main results. That is shows the contribution of this disease and disability to the changes in the nativity gap in mortality risk from age 25 to 84. So the blue bar here again is shows contribution of preference, and the orange bar shows contribution of this mortality impact of this disease and disabilities. So, not surprising, the main reason for this increasing mortality advantage is not due to disease or disability. It's not due to the preference, because as indicated by these blue bars, they does not really make any contribution to this widening nativity gap in mortality. So the main contribution of this increasing immigrant advantage in mortality throughout these 60 years is because they become less likely to die from this major disease, including CVD, lung disease, mental illness, diabetes, and functional and activity limitations. But this kind of advantage is offset by immigrants' increasing risk of dying from cancer and musculoskeletal conditions. So in conclusion, is we do find this paradox, and the paradox in and the narrowing nativity gap in disability with age is attributable to three factors. The first is immigrants' increasing preference on mental illness, diabetes, even though they have low preference in young age, but they have become more likely to have mental illness, diabetes in old age. The second is that even though immigrants have lower preference throughout all age group in lung disease and musculoskeletal conditions, this advantage shrink. That also contribute to this diminished advantage in functional limitation. And the third is that they become more likely to be disabled from this major disease. Another reason why immigrant advantage in mortality increase is because it's not because of preference of this disease or disability. It's just because they become increasing survival advantage in this disease and disability with age, except cancer and musculoskeletal conditions. So then what does all this finding tell us about the mechanisms, right? What's the underlying mechanism shaping this paradox? So in our paper, we try to kind of review several kind of possible explanations, and due to time constraint, I'm just going to focus on one that we think probably makes more sense to explain this paradox. That is a healthy migrant thesis. And so this thesis argues that immigrants possess better health endowment due to the selective nature of migrants, and healthy individuals tend to kind of be able to postpone the onset of this disease and disability to later ages, and also because they have better health endowment, then they may better withstand the mortality consequences of these conditions, and especially in older age, where such health problems become more prevalent. But so our findings probably are most consistent with this mechanism. First is we find this paradox exists for almost all the race, ethnicity, gender, and education level, right? And the latter they indicate this paradox may have something to do with some common factors that exist for all the immigrants, that is health-based selection. And the second is we find that this initial widening and then narrowing the native gap mobility and disability with age is consistent with the argument that immigrants' better health endowment may potentially postpone the onset of disease to later ages. And in terms of decomposition analysis, we also find that immigrants are better off this wearing of many of these fatal diseases, which also support the hypothesis that immigrants may have better health endowment. And in the end, like immigrants' low mortality may further prolong the lives of frail individuals with a disability and disease, which can further lead to this convergence or crossover in disability between immigrants and natives. So in the end, we do find so in the end we find this paradox and point to health-based selection as a main mechanism. That means that the health mortality advantage observed in immigrants probably is going to diminish in the second generation, right? So because they are much less selected, and they also grow up in an environment that may promote different behavior and may facilitate weaker support, and may also subject to this level of discrimination that can potentially change their health endowment and so on. The second thing I want to emphasize is even among first-generation immigrants, mental illness plays a very central role in the aging process. Then prioritizing treatment of that mental illness should be kind of a very important step improving their well-being in old age. Thank you.